I was telling stories in downtown Toronto at a place called the Inner City Angels. And it was an art center, and they brought kids in. And one afternoon, I was up in the library, and I had a group coming from a Catholic school. They had just had lunch, and they were being brought up the stairs to hear stories. And I don't know how many of you work with kids, but you can always tell when a group is a little bit restless, a little bit in your face. And they came in the room, these were 10-year-olds, and they just had that extra little bit of energy and a little bit of swagger, these kids. One boy had a cast on his arm, and he kind of walked in, and he started to blow bubbles at me, had bubble gum in his mouth, and some of the kids still had chips from lunch. And they sat down in front of me. The boy with the cast sat right in front of me and blew a great big pink bubble at me, as if to say, you know, if you can hold us, mister, you better be good, you know. So I took note of all that, and that led to that interesting moment for storytellers, and I think probably for performance poets as well. You try to think what to tell. What's the right story to tell? And in fact, there's a Jewish story about that, and some of you might know it, about the rabbi who had a student, and the student was always so interested. He went to the rabbi one day and said, "Rabbi, I've studied with you for years, and I've often wondered, how did you learn this incredible skill of always knowing what to tell at the right moment? Your stories are the right stories. If people are sad, they make them happy. If they're too happy, they teach them whatever wisdom. How do you learn such a skill?" And the rabbi looked at the student and said, "That reminds me of a story," he said. He said, "There was a young man who wanted to become a sharpshooter. And he went off to become a sharpshooter. He studied at the Academy of Sharpshooting. He became really skilled. He learned every technique of sharpshooting. And he was riding home to show his parents what he had attained, this great knowledge that he had learned. Every skill of sharpshooting, he was really Olympic level. And by the way, I have to mention that my own father-in-law was an Olympic sharpshooter. Kind of sobers you up, you know, you're dating the daughter, a sharpshooter. And I asked him once, how did you I asked him the exact same question, how did you become such an Olympic level sharpshooter? He said, well, he looked a little puzzled. This is a very Zen-like question to him. He said, when I looked at the target, all I saw was the bullseye. Oh, that explains it. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Well, he's riding home to show his parents what he had learned, and he came through this road past a little village, and on the side of the road was a barn. And on the side of the barn, somebody had painted 100 targets, and in the dead center of each target, somebody had shot a perfect bullseye. Now, he had studied for years, but he could not begin to shoot 100 perfect bullseyes. So here the young sharpshooter stopped his horse. He looked around. This is not such a big village. It was even smaller than Durham. No, this was a little village and a little barn, but 100 perfect bullseyes. So he stopped and he said, I thought I learned everything about sharpshooting. I thought I had every skill, every technique. I couldn't do this. I would like to meet the world's greatest sharpshooter who lives in this village. And across the road came a little girl. And she looked up and she said, I did it. He got down off his horse and he looked her in the eye and he said, little girl, I'm a sharpshooter. I know every skill there is to learn. I couldn't do such a thing. Are you telling me the truth? And she said, yes, I am. I did it, sir. And then he said, well, I would like you to be my teacher. You are a master sharpshooter. Teach me your secret. And the little girl said, well, maybe I should explain, sir. See, I don't draw the target first. First I shoot, afterwards I draw the target. And the rabbi said to the student, that's my secret too. I learn stories. That's what I do. I hunt and gather stories. I read, I listen, I invent. And when you go through life with a head full of good stories, it's never hard to find a moment to put the story around. So I was thinking of that, and here are my kids. They're all waiting to hear this story, and what story to tell. So I thought, you know, it's getting close to Halloween. I'll tell them ghost stories, and that's what I did. I lit a candle, I turned out the lights, started telling ghost stories. They were a great audience. Any of you ever work with kids, here's the ultimate method of crowd control: suspense. They all want to know what happens next. It worked for Scheherazade and it worked for me. And they listened very well. And at the end, I told them the story of the golden arm, which some of you probably know. Of course, it's an old story, and it's a brief version, express version. It says that there was a man who wanted to get married, and he looked all around the world, and he finally found a woman, and he asked her to marry him, and she had a golden arm. And he said, "I love you." And she said, "Oh, that's nice." Anyway, they got married. This is the express version. And things went pretty well for a while until one day she got sick, and nobody knew why, and she was getting sicker and sicker. One day she said to her husband, "If I die, I want you to promise to bury me with my golden arm." "Oh, I promise," he said. Anyway, she died. She was buried with the golden arm. He came to the graveyard. He was at the funeral. He was dressed in black, big tears coming down his cheeks. Everybody came around and said, "You must miss her so much." And he said, I do. Yeah. This is how much he missed her. He came back to the graveyard that night with a shovel. And he dug up the grave, opened the coffin, took the golden arm off the body. And he ran home, and he put it under his pillow to keep it safe. And he had golden dreams that night about being rich. And that went on for quite a long time, golden dreams, until one night he had a terrible nightmare. And he was back at the graveyard. The coffin was empty. He looked down, nothing there. He woke up. He was so scared. And there at the end of his bed was his wife, or what was left of her. And he pulled up the blankets. He was very scared. It's funny how you pull up your blankets when you're scared. You ever know that? It's true. I know, you just think I'm one of those digressive storytellers. You're right. I was in an earthquake once in Santa Barbara, California. That's where I went to university. The whole house is shaking, 3 in the morning. What did I do? I pulled out my blankets. So he pulled up his blankets and he said, "What has become of your beautiful hair?" And she said, "All withered and wasted away." He said, "What has become of your cheek so fair?" And she said, "All withered and wasted away." "And what has become of your lovely eyes?" "All withered and wasted away." "What has become of your ruby red lips?" "All withered and wasted away." And she began to reach over the bed towards him with her left arm. And he said, "What has become of your golden arm?" And as she reached over the bed towards him, she said, "You have it." "Sir." All right, look. It's cheap, and I know it. But that's how it's told. That's how, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story I told my little kids. And it was very satisfying. Especially when the kid's bubble burst all over his face, and that felt good. And everybody jumped. It's called a jump story. It's a whole genre of story. You know, you've heard these stories before. Some of them, anyway, I won't go into it. But one little girl didn't jump. And this is really why I'm telling you my whole long, complicated story. She was just sitting there. She didn't jump. And I was talking to the kids afterwards. I said, "I hope you enjoyed the stories." Yeah, we enjoyed them. This little girl said, "I really liked your stories, but I didn't jump." And I said, "I saw that. You didn't even jump. The golden arm, it's a jump story. Everybody jumps." "Oh, what has become of you?" "Who? You got it." "Nobody, but you didn't jump." She said, "Yeah, I didn't jump." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because when I knew it was going to be scary, I held the Blessed Virgin Mary." That's what she was holding around her neck, an amulet. And she said, "You should get one." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure I should. I'm Jewish." She said, "That's okay, get a Jewish one." So I carry her with me ever since, and I suppose that's one reason we have these wonderful festivals and gatherings she did know something very, very true, and that is that things are scary, way scarier than the golden arm. And we're living through times that are unprecedented. We're the first generation to experience some of the things we're going through. What do you hold on to? And if you're a storyteller or a poet or a writer, you hold on to the idea that literature, a head full of stories, can see you through sometimes.